What's your story? Whether you're a client or an independent financial advisor, we know you face many important decisions that can affect your and your clients' long-term financial success. Welcome to the WIN Podcast, What's Important Now with Corey Heimensen, accredited investment fiduciary and president of Heimensen Wealth Advisors. In this podcast, Corey helps you identify your goals and objectives through financial education and comprehensive planning, while inspiring you to make better behavioral decisions in your personal finance. With a twist on pop culture and current events, join us as we explore growth and protection strategies for individuals, advisors, and their businesses. Come and discover what's important to you now.
Hello and welcome to the WIN Podcast with Corey Heimensen. Corey, how are you?
Great, Eric. Good to see you.
It is good to be back with you, my man. And I'm excited about today's topic. This content is, I think it's evergreen in a way, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah. So why don't you share with the audience what we're going to be talking about today?
I titled this the Storm episode. So stormy weather, stormy life events, you name it, uncertain, difficult times. How about that?
Yeah. And we're recording this just about a week after, a little less than a week actually, of some pretty major storms that came through. And I know that Andover, Kansas, thankfully, I from what I read and what I heard, nobody perished in that. But there was a tornado that touched down there. There was lots of thunder and lightning and rain around us. And I know this podcast is nationwide, but I think everybody, no matter where you live, this can resonate with you. You've been through a storm of some kind, one kind or another, and there's always things that you think about during that time or prep that you do beforehand. So are we talking about preparation for storms? Are we talking about managing the storms? Or how do you, what are we breaking this down to today?
Yeah, I would even call it a combination of that. Obviously storms, by whatever definition that is, are things that surprise us, essentially. Mm-hmm. Or maybe there's a little bit of warning, but you have to adapt and adjust and make the best of the situation, essentially. And I'm not trying to make light of horrible events that happen that cause destruction, but I think it's a good way for people to think about, what a storm is or how you get through a storm and what you appreciate on the backside of getting out of a storm, essentially.
So as you were saying that, something popped into my mind, and I don't want to lead us down a rabbit hole here, but when it comes to storms, physical rain, thunder, tornadoes in the Midwest, at least, if you're tuned in to the news stations, if you're tuned in to the Weather Channel app or whatever that can bring you that information ahead of time, right? Like you were saying, sometimes there's a surprise, sometimes there's not a lot of warning. But if you're tuned in and you're kind of monitoring, then you have a much better chance, right, of not taking as much damage or being more prepared. I would say that. Thinking of COVID, if you were tuned in to what people were saying, it's not like we had years warning, but people were talking about it a little bit ahead of time, and it did come upon us fairly quickly, but it was a few weeks before, we saw a lot of the turmoil that quote unquote storm called. And that's kind of how I view you, is that when it comes to finances, you're the guy that's tuned in. And if I'm tuning into you, not just the podcast, but talking to you on a regular basis, and you're the one that's tuned into what's going on, and you have more advanced notice than most people. Am I misspeaking, or is that a fair statement? I don't want to pump you up too much, or but that's how I look at it.
No, I think that's a very good statement, and you can compare it to other walks of life too. So if I want to go to the local gym and get in shape and get healthy, and I would probably get better results if I rely on a trainer.
Absolutely.
That knows what's going on, has the knowledge, the expertise. They've been there before, and sometimes they got to kick you in the tail a little bit too. But when it comes to investing and finance and things of that nature, I'm not saying everything I suggest is rock star perfect every time. But I've been around the block long enough, and I know enough that I've seen things, and I just know certain things to look for. But I also know that if you make good decisions and you have good preparation, the chances of good outcomes coming your way is substantially higher than if you're just winging this and just randomly going off in 42 different tangents.
Yeah. Well, before we were actually recording, you were telling me about somebody I had never heard of before, and that's Grace Hopper. Am I saying her name right?
Yeah. I don't know if it's because I'm getting older and having all these birthdays that I'm really intrigued by these historical quotes of people that I've certainly never met. But Grace Hopper was in the U.S. Navy, and she apparently was one of the pioneers in computer programming, I guess. Now, not saying her and I are tight on this and know a lot of common things, but the quote that I found from her that is so awesome, it says, "A ship in port is safe, but that's not what ships are built for." And it's like, man, you think about that, and it's like, that ties right into these stormy weather comments, or the first thing I think of, market volatility.
Yep.
Markets and investments, sometimes they do things that just don't make any sense. But that doesn't mean you stay away or that you're wrong or you get scared out. I mean, just like that ship, the reason it's built strong and it has a purpose is to go out there and do its job. So sometimes you got to take on the stormy seas to get the reward or to get to the destination you're trying to shoot for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so funny. I'm drawing this parallel in my brain here. The ship in port, it's safe. That's her quote. But it's still rusting, right? It's still deteriorating. And I look at somebody says, well, if I have cash at my house, in my safe in my house, it's safe. But guess what? It's deteriorating too, right? I mean, with inflation and everything else, it's not necessarily safe. I mean, it's safe from market volatility, but you're still losing. It's still rusting away.
Yeah, the name of the game is purchasing power risk. And when inflation and things cost more next year and the year after that, that money stacked up in your safe or buried in the backyard doesn't keep up. It doesn't do you any good. And I am amazed how often I talk to someone and they say, yeah, I have a safe at home and I own, a lot of people seem to own silver coins too. I don't know. But a lot of people have cash piled up in a safe in their house. And it just amazes me. It's okay to have a little money around the house, but I don't know why anybody would have $10,000 in a safe, but it seems like you hear people that do this.
Yeah, I don't know what emergency fund needs to be that high in a safe, right? I mean, sure.
Yeah, money at the bank, you can get to it within a day or two. I mean, not many surprise events happen in life like TV or movies where you have to have ransom money or something in 2 hours. You know what I mean? So, I don't know. It's a safety net of sorts. And that's somewhere where I'm going to go down the path on this podcast is, it's good to have some safe money. And then you want some medium risk money and some long-term or more aggressive money. I mean, but you don't have to have it in greenback cash in your back pocket or in your safe at home.
Yeah. And for any of our listeners that actually do have kidney money set aside, we're not making fun of you. Just there's a better way. And maybe a more legal way too.
Yeah. I mean, Eric, you really nailed it right there. Whatever your system is out there, whoever's listening, whatever your system is, that's fine. It's your system.
Yeah.
But just understand the consequences of your actions. So if you're stacking up money and it isn't growing for you, or you're investing in silver coins or gold or palladium, things we've already talked about before, just understand the opportunity cost of that trade-off of not being invested, not getting that dividend, not getting that interest income. That there's different ways to, geez, was I going to say skin a cat? Can I even say that?
Yeah, well, I already talked about kidneys. Cats are fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where that saying ever came from. Somebody will have to research that and drop me an email. But,
email in.
I guess the point is there are consequences to every decision.
Yeah.
And so you want to make good decisions because that's going to help your consequences.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about, I mean, we already know the consequences of not, following good instructions and seeking out somebody who's tuned in or who's in the know. How do you talk to your clients about it, or how do you explain how you deal with adversity?
I think the first thing I do is I explain that there are going to be events of adversity. We are not going to make perfect decisions and avoid all these bumps in these roads or turbulence on that flight, whatever it is. There will be events that are going to shake your system a little bit at times, but that's part of the game. And so we try to, I always use the term buckets. And every time I use it, I think, well, that's so simple, but then maybe that's why it's good. So if I'm visiting with you, Eric, or the next client or whomever, we talk about having maybe 5 different buckets. And they look at me funny. And what I mean by that is we segment, so to speak, your assets into different objectives or timelines, essentially. So bucket number one is going to be safe money. Does that mean safe as the safe in your house or checking or some kind of money market account that just doesn't fluctuate? That's the money we're going to use first for things that you need to spend on or emergency type situations. Investments, cash, anything in that safe bucket, number one, we don't want it being volatile. We don't want it fluctuating with the bond index markets or the fixed income market or the equity markets. We want that to be safe and boring.
Mm-hmm.
Bucket number two can be a little bit more aggressive. Maybe that's the money we're going to try and tap in 3 years from now or 4. And then maybe bucket number 3 is in the middle. That's 10 years from now, and on and on and on. And so out there to, your 30 or 40 year future, that can be your retirement plan at work, your 401k. That should be aggressive because, hey, that can weather volatility. It can weather storms because you're not going to tap that money until you're after 59 and a half years old. So maybe that's, okay, I said 40. Maybe it's 30 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about, if a person frames their mind around what I've just described, then the headlines on TV or on your phone aren't scary because your retirement money is so many decades away that don't sweat it. Just keep adding to that account. What you need to solve, and here's the name of the podcast we're talking about, what's important now.
Yeah.
Let's take care of what's important today or now. That's bucket number one. If you got bills to pay, you got a kid going to college in 6 months, that is money you don't want to screw up, for lack of a better professional phrase.
Mm-hmm.
So we keep it in the safe spot, and we mix and match these things, and we change things on the fly, and that's what having a coach in your corner does, whether it's me or any other financial professional, just like the trainer at the gym, somebody that can give you the advice you need to hear it, whether you want to hear it or not, good, bad, or indifferent. You want somebody being real with you.
Corey, it's you and I've been talking for a while, and I like to think of myself as a student. If I can sit down with somebody who's a whole lot smarter than me, like you are, that's what I want to be. So it's interesting because I just had to do this, the kind of the bucket approach. My wife was driving with my son, who's a mechanic, and this was about a month ago. And out of nowhere, she had a little Nissan Murano, and it just started shaking like crazy and running terribly. And they pulled over, and it wouldn't start right. And my son's like, I'm not sure. Obviously, he's got to take a look at it, and so on and so forth. We've already poured a bunch of money in this. It's an '07, right? So it's past its prime. It's over 200,000 miles, and we've been thinking about getting something anyway. But it was just not very good timing. And I'm like, man, we're not ready to get something right this moment. We're not going to go out tomorrow and buy a car. I'm a guy who likes to research. So that next day, because we need 2 vehicles, I've got a truck and it runs great, but we do need 2 vehicles right now because you and I have talked, we just sold our home, we're moving into another one, and there's all sorts of things going on. So I had the cash, if you will, I'm using air quotes, the cash to rent a car. So I for my business, I rent cars all the time. So I just went down to budget and said, hey, I need a car for probably a week, maybe 2 weeks. And so it was a little over a week and it cost me like $400. That's not too bad to buy myself time to be able to pull the money from different locations that I'm going to spend on a car. My wife and I agreed our budget was about $10,000 for the car. And we found one, but we found one near the end of that week. So giving us that cushion, being able to pull quick instant money, the $400 it would take to get a rental car for a week, so I could take my time, research what car we wanted, find the right one that she liked, and then make that purchase with, being able to pull money out of other accounts where I'm not having to dip into any 401ks or anything that's going to be that long-term bucket you're talking about. It was so incredibly helpful and so less stressful than trying to make a snap decision right that same day.
You've hit it on the head, and it's got my mind just racing. I get all jacked up with that. and what's coming to my mind is, number one, yes, you did a good thing. Sometimes you got to put a Band-Aid on things in order to get to the next step of the bigger solution. And the first thing that's popping into my mind, and I get this from a lot of times it's newer clients who, maybe they only have one account at my office and they're pretty new to the game, and they really focus on how much did I put in that account? I took some withdrawals, I put some in. What's really my true cost in this? Have I made $1? Am I down $1? And it's not the right question to ask because you're looking backwards. You're driving that car by looking in the rearview mirror, and that's not how you do it. You go through the windshield and you got to look forward. Mm-hmm. I don't care if your account's lost money already or not. I don't care if your vehicle just died. You got to solve for that right now, looking forward. And if that means spending some money to then make a good decision, that's okay. You can't focus on the true cost of things sometimes or historical events. You just got to circle the wagons and come up with the next best decision to get you going forward. Because that's how you succeed in life. It's a lot of small victories, not just one major grand slam. Or I think you know where I'm trying to go along.
Yeah.
But and that all ties back to this storm too. Life is not perfect. Investing's not perfect. There's going to be some times where you have to step back and say, well, I kind of goofed that thing up, but you know what? I learned from it, and I'm better because of it.
Yeah. Yep. And that's in speaking to you about the market volatility that we faced in 2020 with COVID and the drop in the market. You've spoken on previous podcasts before about panicking, right? And not making those snap decisions. People that pulled out of the market when it went down, 30% in March of 2020, missed an incredible rebound. And they lost a ton of money because they didn't participate in that rebound. And you spoke about that. Same thing with this car. I mean, it seems silly, but by waiting that week, actually it was about 8 days or so, we found the perfect car with way less mileage than we ever thought we could. And it just happened to be on the last day that we were test driving 3 or 4 different cars. It just happened to pop up. And we got exactly what she wanted at a much better price than we ever thought possible because we didn't panic and go out and buy a car that same day that our car crapped out on us. You know what I mean? So I think that, it's a very, very small example, but when you talk about that, you're speaking just straight truth. You're giving yourself that time to breathe. And I think that that's what, in a lot of ways, an advisor does. You or somebody else, whether it's another advisor, people that are working with advisors that are listening to this right now, hopefully they're helping you to take the emotion out of decisions. So,
Absolutely.
Because a storm is emotional, period.
No, absolutely. And in my mind, the first thing I was thinking as you were saying that is there's a difference between cost and value.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And a lot of people in your situation would have said, I'm not going to go rent that car for $400 because I got to buy a new one anyway. Mm-hmm. I'm going to save that $400 and put that toward the new car. But no, the right way is what you did. Take your time, and end up getting a better deal instead of making a snap judgment on emotion. And you really nailed that because that is the number one thing that a good advisor can do. Well, there's 2 things. A good advisor listens more than they talk. And number 2, they can take the emotion out of things when it comes to making good decisions. And that is so important in life. It takes money to make money, as they always say too, so It's okay to spend on things that will value or bring value to you down the road, whether that's that vehicle, an advisor, an accountant, a physician, on and on and on.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you do that with clients specifically when it comes to volatility and making sure that your clients are taking from the appropriate bucket and really understanding that concept that you're telling them. How do you do that?
Yeah, we go, what I like to say, a little above and beyond what most offices do. And so once we identify those buckets that we already talked about, we also have technology in place here where we are scoring every investment asset in every account every day. And so what that does is it lets us identify, hey, what kind of volatility level or what kind of risk level do we want in the first bucket or the third bucket or the fifth? And by having technology on all these things, we can instantly see if something's out of whack. So kind of like you said, if you're watching the weather updates or the Weather Channel and there's a storm moving your way, you have a little bit of warning.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're doing here too. We're looking at all the pieces of your financial puzzle, and if we see something that doesn't look right or doesn't pass the smell test or whatever you want to call it, we have got time to adjust or at least have the conversation and educate what the consequences are if we don't make adjustments for that client.
Yeah. Well, the crazy thing is that before I had an app on my phone that allowed me to see the radar, Corey, I never really understood how a storm got to us. That sounds really stupid, but I hope the audience forgives my the way I'm saying that. But really, I always thought it was like, so there's a storm that is coming in from, maybe Colorado, or maybe it's coming up from the south. I'm in Nebraska, so I'm just using this as a reference, right in the middle of the country. We get weather from north of us, south of us, west of us, sometimes east, but not normally. But it depending on where it's coming from, it brings something else with it. But when I started looking on the app and had access to Doppler radar, I've realized that storms can just crop up out of nowhere. So some of them you can see coming for a while. And then all of a sudden you put that app in motion, and it shows you storms that are just going to be created because of the different winds that are coming in or whatever. You don't even see them coming. It's not like it's coming from the Gulf or it's coming from another state. They just pop up. So I kind of see it as two different types of storms. I know that you talk about being able to weather the storm and avoid them, but how do we build a good, strong foundation to be able to do that and not be concerned about noise, right? Because storms bring noise, and so does the media. I'm just drawing a quick parallel there. The media brings lots of noise, quote unquote, but because storms bring noise as well. So how do you help people build that good foundation?
Yeah, building a good investment plan or making good financial decisions is not just a snap your fingers and it's done forever situation. It's like building something. It's like, you could almost say it's like building a house. Mm-hmm. If you're building a house, you're either going to put down a slab of concrete, or throughout the Midwest, it's usually a basement, and a foundation. You've got to have a solid starting point under you before you start building upward and getting fancier and all the details and things. And so I do liken a financial or an investing or a financial planning journey as step-by-step of construction, essentially. 20-year-old person that comes in to open their first account, they can't have the entire big mansion on the end of the block that everybody else wants. You got to start small, essentially, and you build things up. And you got to get comfortable with each step or each level before you go on to the next. And then once the whole journey is complete and you've got the yard landscaped and all that stuff and the pool out back or whatever your thing is, then you got to pass it on to the next generation. So, a financial plan is a living and breathing thing for a lot of people and a lot of years.
Corey, I love that analogy because as a homeowner myself, when we bought our house, the first thing I was concerned about was making sure that we had it inspected, right? Had that foundation was good, that we had everything that was supposed to be in place. And then if it was going to rain, the roof was still good. We knew the roof was good. Windows were okay, right? They're a little older, but they're good. It wasn't until we made sure that everything was running as smoothly as it possibly could, that then we decided to beautify the house. Does that make sense? Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
We planted a tree where an older tree had been and we had to take out. Planted a tree there. My wife is amazing with flowers, so she's got all sorts of flower beds. Hostas are a thing for her. Those things are crazy. You can't kill a hosta. I don't know anybody out there but our yard has so many around the edges, and it's gorgeous. And she started planting some at the new house, so that we have. They come up every year. Like I said, you can't kill them, even in the dead of winter. They pop up again, and they're beautiful. So we started to do that, and I kind of see that as part of an overall retirement plan or an overall financial plan, that you get that core, you get that foundation, you get it moving in the right direction, and then you have that freedom to beautify it with maybe some different options that you're going to do, or maybe some other things that you're thinking about, or maybe some other investments that you're interested in. But because you have that foundation, it allows you the freedom to beautify your plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's kind of like the fruits of your labor, right? Isn't that what they say? That as years go by and you've done the right thing with your finances, eventually you can start to see the bounty, so to speak, kind of like your hostas. You know what I mean? It's like, boy, they get better every year. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what this does too. And eventually the conversation, the bar keeps getting raised, that I don't have to talk about charitable giving or donor advised funds with a 25-year-old. Mm-hmm. But their parents or their grandparents have already been down the path or the journey that they're on to a new topic that's different.
That's right.
That pertains to their situation. Every advisor out there in North America is going to tell you, you got to set goals and you'll get to them 40 years from now. Sort of right. But again, the podcast here, what's important now? Let's solve for today. And we know that these decisions we make today compound, snowball, whatever you want to say. And eventually we got a lot of good decisions in our pocket. And then we're on to bigger and better things. And it's just part of the overall satisfaction curve of life, or the enjoyment phase, whatever you want to call it. This is not about how much money you have. It's about doing the things you want to do, retiring the way you want to retire. And that doesn't mean skydiving or, all the fancy pictures you see in magazines. It might be just donating your time or sitting out back with your grandkids on the back porch. Whatever it is, but it's your plan, and you should by all means, dominate it as long as you can throughout life by having a coach kicking you in the tail.
There you go. So as we wrap up this podcast, what are your closing thoughts?
I mean, really, what this comes down to is if you want to weather a storm or take a flight across the country, it really comes down to two things that are important: optimism and faith. Faith in the plan that you're part of, because there's going to be turbulence on that flight. There's going to be bumps in your day-to-day living or your job, career, whatever it is, but you got to have optimistic beliefs that, hey, I'm going to get through this and I'm going to be somebody and I'm going to make the world a better place. Man, I'm on a cheerleading bucket today, aren't I?
Yeah. It's so much better than that kidney bucket. So
yeah. Well, we made a round term. But this stuff isn't easy. It takes effort. You gotta walk the right path for a long time and take time and patience to do good things with your investments and your money and your joy of life.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here. Boy, there's a lot of dead animals in this analogies today, isn't it? Sorry about the cats and horses, guys. But really with this house analogy, I'm thinking that there's people nationwide, again, that listen to this podcast and they get a lot of information out of it. But if they're interested in being able to sit on their porch and the porch of their financial plan, right? They built this foundation, they built this financial plan, this house, if you will, and they're ready to kind of sit and enjoy the fruits of their labor, and they want to be able to just kind of look around and say, I'd like to add some little touches here and there, but I don't have to because I'm secure in where I'm at. Not everybody's in that situation. And I know that there are people that are listening that probably want to be in that situation and aren't. So please give me your contact information so they can reach out. And whether they're not working with anybody else, or if they are, I know that you always do second opinions.
Absolutely. No matter where you are on your journey, it never hurts to get another opinion of somebody else, because your journey can be improved from this moment forward. And so I'd encourage people to call or email us. Let's go with email today. How about podcast@thewin.today?
Wow, that's perfect. I love that. Is that one new?
Yeah, we've got it under the radar here for a while, but yeah, we like to roll out new things once in a while.
All right. Love it. Love it. Corey, thank you so much for your time today, man. This has been fantastic.
Absolutely. It's always a joy.
All right. And of course, our last thank you goes to you, listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Win Podcast with Corey Heimensen. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Corey comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And this makes it really easy to share these podcasts with your friends and family. And if one of your friends' family works with PETA, we really didn't harm any animals in this podcast at all. So please don't write in for that. Write in for other reasons, please. Anyway, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Heimensen Wealth Advisors, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Win Podcast. What's important now? The show that helps you achieve your financial dreams. To ask questions about topics covered during the show or get a copy of Stop Doing Dumb Things with Your Money by Corey Heimensen, visit www.heimensenwealth.com or give us a call at 712-472-3867. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. Securities offered through Securities America Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Inc. Heimensen Wealth Advisors and Securities America are separate entities.